society to the provisions of the Disabilities Act and how it will affect all our lives. Ultimately, it is the intention that the entire country will be mobilized to prevent any form of discrimination against persons with disabilities. At this time in our program, I will invite Mr. Akeem Cummings to deliver the prayer. Before Akeem comes, let me tell you that he's a student with a visual disability and he's currently pursuing his master's degree in education. He is a first-class graduate from the Faculty of Social Sciences. So let us invite Mr. Akeem Cummings.
Good morning, one and all protocols observed. Let us pray. Most righteous and eternal God, our Father and our Savior, our very present help in the time of need. Lord, we come to you on this wise, Lord, that you will lead us and you will guide us throughout this seminar. Lord, that you will touch, Lord, every presenter. Lord, that they will speak, oh God, as you give them utterance. Lord, we pray that the seminar, Lord, will indeed cause impact and empowerment to the lives of this vulnerable community. Lord, we know your word reminds us, Lord, that without knowledge, your people perish. And Lord, today we are here to be educated, oh God, that we may not perish. So Lord, we just ask you that you will guide the proceedings of today, that you will have your way, and that we will have a productive day. These and other mercies we ask. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cummings. Having invoked the presence of the Almighty, we are sure that all will be well today. At this point in the program, I move to greetings, and so I will invite the greetings by Dr. Sadia Sanchez-Vegas, Director and Representative of UNESCO Cluster Office for the Caribbean. Dr. Sanchez-Vegas, we invite you to bring greetings.
Thank you very much. Good morning. All protocols observed. Allow me to start by commending the University of the West Indies Center for Disability Studies for their exceptional leadership in relentlessly advocating for disability inclusion in Jamaica and the wider Caribbean. It was my sincere honor and pleasure to accept this invitation, and I am delighted to join the special seminar on the implementation of the Disabilities Act of Jamaica today. In Latin America and the Caribbean region, it is estimated that more than 8 million girls and boys below the age of 14 and 6.5 million adolescents live with some form of disability. In Jamaica alone, around 200,000 persons live with some form of disability. Legislation is a cornerstone for the social inclusion of those 200,000 persons with disabilities and their meaningful participation in all spheres of life and on an equal basis with others. It is the game changer for creating an inclusive and enable environment where each person can thrive and enjoy their fundamental freedoms. Advancing legislation for persons with disabilities in the Caribbean is essential to protect and promote human rights in line with the international commitments made through the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Therefore, we are pleased that the government of Jamaica is taking the necessary steps so that the Disabilities Act of 2014, which is grounded on the referred convention, can come into effect this year. As the specialized UN Agency on Education, Sciences, Culture, and Communication and Information, UNESCO is prepared to harness its expertise to support Caribbean countries and territories in identifying best policy practices to promote human rights and tackle intercepting forms of discrimination against persons with disabilities and to foster their meaningful inclusion across or our areas of mandate. In this regard, as the lead United Nations Agency on Quality Education stated in the Sustainable Development Goal 4 of the 2030 Agenda, UNESCO is strongly committed to advocating for inclusive education tailored to the specific needs of children and adolescents with disabilities. To promote respect for diversity is most important, but it's not enough. We are committed to advancing inclusion in education by all possible means. Many changes can be made on that journey in gestures made by teachers, the learning environment that school leaders create for students, the physical design of schools that allow for student inclusion, among others. In the field of education, UNESCO dedicated the 2020 edition of its flagship Global Education Monitoring Report to the topic of inclusion. The report reminds us of continuing education disparities, including ensuring access to all, which is a foundation for fostering inclusive and fair societies. Adopting an all means all approach to inclusive education means dropping any stigmatizing labels assigned to children. Employing learning approach on an account on such labels limits their potential, ignoring the benefits of varied learning methods to all children. Thus, how education systems and education policies are designed is critical. Furthermore, ensuring access to education is also a prerequisite for providing persons with disability with future opportunities to obtain decent employment. Thus, legislation is vital to remove financial, physical, and environmental barriers and foster inclusive learning solutions to ensure that students with disabilities are not left behind. As the United Nations agency working to build inclusive knowledge societies, UNESCO also emphasizes improving access to information and knowledge. Indeed, digital technologies offer unprecedented opportunities for expanding access to education, public services, and professional activities. The New Delhi Declaration on Inclusive ICTs for Persons with Disability, Making Empowerment a Reality, stands for the commitment of UNESCO's member states to harness the power of ICTs for the meaningful inclusion of persons with disabilities. This has become even more important in times of the COVID-19 pandemic, where, for example, learners with disabilities bear a disproportionate and unequal share of the impact. Not all learners have access to the specific technology which will allow them to benefit from distance learning, while many learning platforms and digital content are not fully accessible for all students. Ladies and gentlemen, legislation and commitment by governments to advance the meaningful inclusion of persons with disability is fundamental. Nevertheless, this must be accompanied by a solid engagement at the societal level in which the cultural notions of normality and ability which lead to the discrimination and exclusion of persons with disabilities are addressed. Challenges remain. Access gaps affecting persons with disabilities and the imperative to reduce them call on government, civil society organizations, universities and research centers, accompanied by the private sector, as well as international agencies, disabilities associations and organizations to create enable environment promote rehabilitation and support services, guarantee social protection throughout life, formulate and implement inclusive policies and programs in the educational work, and generate legal frameworks that promote comprehensive care and access for persons with disability from a sustained and holistic systemic perspective. In this sense, special attention must be paid to SDG 4 on education, SDG 8 on decent employment, SDG 10 on reducing inequalities, SDG 11 on the inclusiveness of cities and accessibility of transportation, and SDG 17 on the follow-up of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. We need to challenge and transform deeply ingrained attitudes, norms, and prejudices that violate the human rights of persons with disabilities. In partnership with the Center of Disability Studies, we have conducted a series of regional training to promote a culture of peace and non-violence. We will launch a training manual designed to provide practical knowledge and equip those on the front line to promote disability inclusive actions across the Caribbean. We invite you to use this tool for your advocacy and raise awareness about the importance of the meaningful inclusion of persons with disabilities. Thank you for your kind attention, and I wish you an enriching seminar today.
So I will read the Dean's greeting. Madam Chairman, Minister of Labor and Social Security, the Honorable Carl Samuda, Dr. Sadia Sanchez Vegas, Director of UNESCO Caribbean Office, members of the Faculty of Social Sciences and broader UWI community, members of the community of persons with disabilities, students, and fellow Jamaicans, a special good morning to you all. It is a signal honor for me to participate in this special seminar entitled The Disabilities Act, What is in it for me?, which is organized by the UWI Center for Disability Studies and the Faculty of Social Sciences. As Dean of the Faculty, I am extremely pleased that we have taken keen interest in the implementation of the Disabilities Act 2014. The Act takes effect in 1 month on February 14, 2022. Today's seminar is designed to promote the implementation of the legislation that will transform and empower persons with disabilities in Jamaica. Effective legislation has been known to considerably assist in the inclusion, participation, and non-discrimination of persons with disabilities in society. The American Disabilities Act, for example, has significantly assisted this cause in the United States of America. We must therefore note that persons with disabilities in Jamaica understand the Disabilities Act and what is in it for them, and that the society generally understands its role in facilitating the inclusion, participation, and non-discrimination of persons with disabilities. It is absolutely critical that all Jamaicans recognize and accept the principle that persons with disabilities have the same fundamental rights as any other person. No self-respecting society in the modern era can adequately move forward without such recognition and without such inclusion. This is why we are here today to discuss the provisions of this landmark legislation. The Faculty of Social Sciences has had an extremely rich history of teaching and engagement with persons with disabilities. Firstly, this has been the faculty of choice for many of the students with disabilities who have attended the UWI over the years. We can proudly boast of graduates such as Senator Dr. Floyd Morris, Miss Gloria Goff, Mr. Wilbert Williams, Miss Monica Bartley, Dr. Wendy Williams, Dr. Curtis Sweeney, Mr. Akeem Cummings, Mr. Damian McLean, Mr. Sean Harvey, and Miss Dina Gay Weller, to name a few, who have blazed a trail in this noble faculty. All of these individuals have moved on to give tremendous service to the community of persons with disabilities and to the country at large. Secondly, the efforts to get students with disabilities recognized and supported at the UWI Mona have their genesis in the Faculty of Social Sciences. It was through the advocacy of lecturers such as Professor Mark Figueroa and Dr. Michael Witter that the senior administration at UWI established a special committee to cater to students with disabilities in 1991. These efforts subsequently morphed into the current Office of Special Student Services and to the UWI Mona policy for students with disabilities. We are proud of this history. The efforts of the UE Mona to cater to the needs of students with disabilities are by no means perfect. However, they constitute the best response from any tertiary education institution in Jamaica and perhaps the broader Caribbean. We endeavor to ensure that the learning needs of students are catered to on a consistent basis. We provide volunteers to assist students with disabilities. We provide ongoing sensitization sessions for lecturers to know how to relate to students with disabilities. And we provide assistive digital technology support to our students with disabilities. The type of support that we give capacitates our students with disabilities and contributes to them being high performers. Mr. Akeem Chambers, who opened with prayer this morning, is a first-class honors graduate from the Faculty of Social Sciences. It is without question that when persons with disabilities are provided access and receive the right support, they will be able to perform at their optimum and participate in society on an equal basis with others. The Faculty of Social Sciences, through the UE Center for Disability Studies, will continue to assist in driving the disability agenda in Jamaica and the broader Caribbean. In this regard, we would like to make the following commitments to the population of persons with disabilities for the next decade. 1, to conduct annually at least one research study relating to the socioeconomic conditions of persons with disabilities in the Caribbean. 2, to transform the results of these research studies into policy briefs for governments in the Caribbean. 3, to intensify the documentation on peer-reviewed publications on persons with disabilities in the Caribbean with the aim of constructing a Caribbean disability identity. 4, to establish a Bachelor of Sciences in Disability Studies at the UE Mona. 5, to conduct on an annual basis a minimum of 2 public seminars relating to different aspects of life related to persons with disabilities. 6, to publish on an annual basis in reputable media at least 2 articles promoting issues related to persons with disabilities. 7, to advocate for governments within the Caribbean to adopt an inclusive education strategy towards persons with disabilities. 8, to consistently advocate for all countries in the Caribbean to establish specific legislation to protect persons with disabilities. And 9, to consistently advocate for the employment of persons with disabilities throughout the Caribbean. These are 9 solid commitments that we are making to the community of persons with disabilities. As indicated, they will be implemented with project funding through the UWI Center for Disability Studies, with its director, Senator Dr. Floyd Morris, who has a long-standing relationship with the community of persons with disabilities. We can be sure that these commitments will be realized. We urge all Jamaicans to come on board and to support the efforts of the government to include persons with disabilities in the mainstream of society. These individuals are our brothers and sisters who represent a sizable 15% of our population, and we cannot afford to allow their talents and abilities to be unrealized, unrecognized, and therefore go to waste. We must ensure that they are fully included and are afforded a voice in our homes, schools, churches, workplaces, and any other public facilities. As Senator Dr. Morris always says, disability respects no one. You may be able-bodied today and disabled tomorrow. So respect persons with disabilities. I thank you. We thank the Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences, Professor David Tennant, for his greetings. We now move to the inviting the minister. I'm not sure the minister is not yet here. So I think we will move forward with the program. The minister is expected to speak on the purpose of the Disabilities Act. We know how busy ministers of government can be, and so we will facilitate minister when he gets here. So we will therefore invite Senator Dr. Floyd Morris, Director of the UWI Center for Disability Studies, to speak on the Disabilities Act. What is in it for me? Senator, welcome. As we wait for Senator, let me recognize again all who are joining us online. We say welcome. I see a number of persons on, and I think we need to acknowledge the Jamaica Sign Language interpreter, Miss Stephanie Spencer. I think there's another one now. There is Cicely Donaldson. So we welcome all persons who are helping with signing. Is Senator now available?
Hello?
Senator?
You're hearing me?
Yes, hearing you. So
okay,
welcome.
Great.
We invite your...
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Dr. Heather Ricketts, Deputy Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences. And let me say all protocols observed, and to express my profound regret at not being physically here with the team because of some challenges, circumstances beyond my control, but I am very much confident in the capacity of the team that I am working with, and I want to commend them for the tremendous effort that they have made thus far. The team from the Center for Disability Studies, the Office for Special Student Services, the Faculty of Social Sciences have come together to put on this excellent seminar today. And, you know, I am extremely pleased and heartened by the response thus far, because when I checked the participant needle, over 180 individuals have logged on to the Zoom, and I never checked on what is happening with YouTube. So I'm very happy at the interest that have been stimulated for this seminar.
Senator, may I interrupt you for a few seconds?
Okay.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Okay, so Minister Carl Samuda is here.
Okay, great.
And so I think we should facilitate the minister. We want to welcome Minister,
right,
Honorable Minister Carl Samuda, Minister of Labor and Social Security. Minister, thank you for being here. We had just moved on, but we will facilitate you at this point. We know how busy you may be, and so could I invite you now? Yes, so Minister will speak on the purpose of the Disabilities Act. Let's welcome the Minister. And we thank you, Senator, for understanding. We will move to you as soon as we have heard the Minister. Thank you. We were taking Senator Morris.
Oh, is he here?
No, he's unfortunately not able. He's joining via Zoom.
Oh,
But Minister, welcome.
all right, great. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Minister, just let me say something quickly.
Yes, you go ahead.
So as I indicated, the minister is here, but before the minister speaks, let me just say that the minister, the Honorable Minister Carl Samuda, has been Minister of Labor and Social Security for over a year. He made the commitment to have the Disabilities Act implemented under his leadership. And he has honored that commitment by setting the effective date for the legislation for February 14, 2022. It's a major accomplishment, and Minister, we salute you for your tremendous effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. And this is a signal that certainly this organization, this effort is one that is taken very, very seriously. And I like the business-like approach that you have adopted, that you start on time, you get your agenda going, and you complete your business as planned. Thank you very much. In fact, while I was on my way, I thought for sure I would be late, but I'm happy that I'm here in time. I have actually been and addressed this body before, when in the first year that I was made Minister of Labor and Social Security. And as now, my host was Senator Morris. Senator Morris and I have a long relationship as colleagues, parliamentary colleagues. And I always enjoy coming to anything that he has anything to do with because of his commitment and determination to see to the well-being of the community of persons with disabilities. So it's a pleasure for me. As you said, when I was appointed Minister of Labor and Social Security in September of 2020, I promised that advancing the legislative agenda would be one of my main priorities in my very first year, because I it occurred to me, based on information given to me at the time I joined this ministry, that this had been languishing for many years. And I must say that I became very proactive, because I think it is a piece of legislation whose time had elapsed, in the sense that it hadn't been attended to in a manner that befits the importance of the subject matter. So, I know that since 2014 and 2020, when I came to the ministry, that was a long enough time. And so I made a special effort, and we put the regulations and gave effect, which gave effect to the act, was put to Parliament and approved. We at the ministry worked hard to ensure the regulations were ready. And I want to commend all the persons within the ministry that worked so hard to make this a reality, because the minister really, thank you. The minister really gets involved, yes, and is the driving force within the ministry to get things done. And certainly in my case, that's one of the characteristics that I carry with me. But it is the effort of the technocrats, those who have dedicated a lot of years and time in seeing to it that these legislative matters are completed. Last October, just over 12 months after becoming the Minister of Labor and Social Security, we passed the regulations, which had been anxiously awaited. And we're happy that this was a precursor to where we are going to be on February the 14th. I'm happy and proud that the Disabilities Act and regulations will officially come into effect on February the 14th, 2022. And I might just pause here and share with you a bit of experience. When it was first mooted as to when it would come into effect, it was to be the case that it would come into effect sometime later. And I said, no, whatever we have to do. And I was the one who set the date of February 14th, because I felt that it had been there too long. We have come this close, and therefore we must accelerate the pace of what we have to do to get it brought into effect. And so we named it, we determined that February 14th was the most appropriate date in the circumstances. So I'm very happy about that. And I know that the whole community of persons with disabilities must be pleased at that, because it certainly indicates the extent to which this government is committed to ensuring the protection of persons with disabilities and doing everything possible to facilitate their development and the growth of the entire organization that guides it. The Disabilities Acts and regulations will make acts of discrimination on the grounds of a person's disability illegal. And that's something you haven't heard from. If anyone is found guilty of discriminating because of one's disability at the workplace, in fact, for any purpose at all, it is an illegal act. We are trying to ensure that persons with disabilities are not made to feel less than anyone else, because their history is replete with extraordinary talent that have been displayed by persons with disabilities. And therefore, it is my job and a pleasurable one to do everything in my power to protect the interests of the persons with disabilities. And the basic standards for engaging persons with disabilities is one of our primary purposes, one of our primary objectives. The act itself encourages all Jamaicans to recognize and accept that persons with disabilities have the same fundamental rights as any other person in the island of Jamaica. In fact, in the world, ought to enjoy the same rights. It promotes individual dignity, freedom of choice and independence is what this act will ensure and protect. It makes sure that the community can take part effectively and are included on an equal basis with others in all aspects of national life. There must be no exclusion. There must be no oversight or lack of oversight to ensure the protection of persons with disability. The Act also promotes acceptance of PWDs and respect for their differences as human beings. There are degrees of disabilities, and that is obvious. Some are not easily discernible. Others are more severe. But in all instances, regardless of the degree to which person is disabled, they are entitled to equal treatment and equal rights under the law. And not just because there is a law, but inculcated in our society must be a commitment, a personal commitment to adhere to the dictates of the law, but it must come from the heart. It must come from a sense of sincerity, of purpose and effort to facilitate persons with disabilities and to treat persons with disabilities with respect. I have found that in dealing with persons with disabilities, they really don't want a pity. What they want is the recognition of their dignity and their right to equal treatment. So I have found that some of the most encouraging things that I learn whenever I'm in the presence of persons with disabilities is the extent to which they tend to be very independent of thought. So much so that they even become independent of action. For those who have a challenge with their gait, they're always willing to, I'm all right, man, don't bother with me. I'm okay, I'll get there. Independence. And that is what this act will seek to protect. But it cannot protect it unless the people themselves have that feeling about respecting persons with disabilities. The population, those who are well and hearted today, don't know when you may be afflicted with some of the challenges that the community faces. And they must understand that collectively, this act is only as good as the spirit in which it is created. The law alone can't, the dictates under the law alone can't ensure the level of protection that we are seeking. It is in the people's hearts, the people who are well and able to have that respect for the community with persons with disabilities. The new Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities will be the government's arm to ensure adherence to the law and its provisions. That new council, well chosen, well planned, and for those who have worked hard to make sure that it exists and functions, I want to commend them. The council will be vigilant as it intensifies its efforts to help protect the rights of persons with disabilities. I expect this council not to be passive, but to be active and aggressive and determined to bring about change. That is what I am looking forward to. And where we find that this is not shared by all, then we will make the appropriate changes. But changes we must have. Yes. We believe that if persons with disabilities are given equal opportunity, their capacity to develop into productive, self-sufficient citizens contributing meaningful to national development will be enhanced. We are absolutely convinced of that. And we must convince all of Jamaica of that fact by demonstrating what can be achieved with support, love, and respect. The codes of practice under this new council will develop and have established these codes of practices to serve as a guide for any area of the code deemed necessary. Any area of the community, anywhere that there is something that is deficient, we are going to reach out to the general population where they can identify specific things that we can ensure is implemented and protected. It will help businesses, schools, health facilities, and other private and public entities as they engage the PWDs in different spheres of the society. So it is not just an insular approach, but we will be reaching out across the various sectors, the business community, social services, social clubs, everywhere in Jamaica. This is a holistic approach to improving the lives and the degree to which the community of disabled persons can share and play their part in the development of our country. The Code of Practice for Employment was created for companies to ensure that individuals with disabilities are not discriminated against at the workplace at any time and at any level. Sometimes we tend to overlook people who are at the lower level of the construct of the business, ignoring the fact that they are equally as important. There is no managing director or president can get anywhere without the full support and cooperation and effort of their member who is at the lowest level on the structure, on the totem pole in the organization. It is inclusive. And in that regard, we are convinced as a government, certainly as a minister, I am convinced that the rights of the disabled must be protected in that environment. Similarly, there is a code of practice for education and training, and the code of practice for health care and health facilities. The code of practice for public passenger vehicles is also to be developed to ensure that persons with disabilities have better access to transportation. Consider for a moment, and I speak now to the wider society, because I'm sure you are aware of the at times humiliating experience of a person wishing to go onto a public transportation, to use public transport. For that matter, for people seeking to enter a building, to engage in important activities, whether it's social or administrative or financial, in a business enterprise, but they can't get comfortable access to where they want to go. They can't climb the stairs. They can't get into the unit, the bus. And at times even getting into the cars, the taxis are challenging. Quite frankly, I would look forward to the day, and I'm making this recommendation to the council, the members who will form the council, that when we take public transportation, the facility that is offering, that the bus, the taxi, what have you, have in its possession steps that will facilitate persons with disability. and not leave it to them to crawl or beg somebody to lift them into the facility that they're seeking to engage. Very important consideration. I have seen the frustration just getting into a vehicle, just getting into a building. And in some cases, they just have to wait and listen to what is taking place in the building because they have no way of getting up there to view. This has to be part, an integral part of what we do in avoiding this obvious appearance of discrimination against persons with disabilities. Similarly, there is a code of practice for all of these things for a purpose. And I don't want anybody to believe that this code of practice is just something written down. I'm hoping that with your support, this code of practice will be vigilantly observed, and that you will play your part in bringing abusers to this code of practice to book, to public attention, to ensure that changes take place. And when I say changes, I don't mean changes that would take years to achieve, as we have gone so many years to get to this point. It is time that we now view this in an accelerated pace. So all that we wish to achieve must be done much quicker than we have so far been able to get it done. We are establishing a disabilities rights tribunal to hear complaints of aggrieved persons and to settle claims. And this cannot just be words, they sound good. I'm not interested in how a thing sounds. I'm not interested in sound bites. What I'm interested in as a minister is action. The revelation of a commitment by the people of Jamaica to have respect for those with disabilities. That is what I am going to use as a measure of judging the success or failure of our activities. What does the Act and regulations mean for you? I know everyone is anticipating the watershed moment on February 14th of this year, when the Disabilities Act and regulations take effect. I also look forward to the days ahead as we get better at including persons with disabilities in all areas of life and prevent discrimination against such persons. I know we are all anxiously awaiting that. And I'm soliciting your support as a community and an outreach program that could be established by the community as persons who are determined to play their part in the development and support of this effort. This important step will be made by making sure if you use a wheelchair, you can enter buildings and get around as you choose. Not to hope and pray that there is a youngster, or take your grandson to make sure you can access areas within the building. Only until that day comes. Only when we are able to give people access to all public buildings easily, that we will be satisfied that our job has been well done. It will make sure that if you are deaf, you can get the information you need in Jamaican Sign Language. That's an interesting point, because it's well to talk about sign language, but the sign language must be interpretable in the language that the people speak. You can't be giving them language that is coming out of Oxford that some of them they don't understand. The sign language must be representative of the code of interpretation that the people carry with them as to whether they understand what you're saying or they don't understand what you're saying. Even people without disabilities sometimes are challenged to understand what somebody says. So we need to have an appropriate strategy to deal with the interpretation that will facilitate the people who have challenges with sight. If you are blind, you can move around with the use of your white cane without fear of bumping into obstacles as you move around, especially our manholes. Good God Almighty. People walking on the side of the road where you're supposed to walk with a sense of freedom and confidence. Too often we have open manholes that are death-defying to those without disabilities, let alone persons who have challenges with their sight. That I'm going to ask for vigilance on observing where that happens anywhere in Jamaica and bring it to public attention in a forceful way if we are to achieve our objectives. If you have intellectual disabilities, you can receive information in simple language that you can understand. For reasons best known to the Lord himself, he didn't make us all able to understand and intellectually interpret all that is delivered by others. But it is left to us as guardians of this particular area of human consideration to make sure that as we exchange ideas, as we interact with persons with intellectual disabilities, which is not to be considered as stigma, and say you're dumb, you're fool, you don't understand, but is with understanding, be able to communicate in a civil, decent, calm, and loving way, so that everybody can be brought along at the same time. It will ensure that if you have mental illness, you are not feared or looked upon with scorn, but you are provided with the necessary medication and other support needed to maintain functionality. Too often we see people with mental disabilities, and they're just, you stand aside and say, boy, thank God I know me. Thank God I know me. You, not me. And very little is done to ensure that the situation can be appropriately corrected and that there is caring in all that we do. We look forward to the days when more employers will be inclusive in their hiring practices, not discriminating. I know productivity is important, and you might interpret someone with a physical impairment that you might feel would not add the level of productivity to your business that you want. But I am pleading with employers to make space, if it is for nothing else as their national contribution, to make space to accommodate those who are not as efficient in their practices as others. We look forward to the days when inclusion policies and practices will be the first order of business, so persons with disabilities can fully participate. Thanks to the team of the JCPD, the team at the ministry, and our valued stakeholders for the outstanding job they have done to get us to this point. I, as a minister, am very happy so far. I'm very happy with the progress being made and the commitment and the support of those involved in this particular area. We will step up the public education campaign to ensure that all Jamaicans know what the Disabilities Act and regulation means and requires. Only through public education can we be assured of spreading what we are about and giving a greater sense of understanding as to what our objectives are, what are our goals, and within what time frame do we expect to achieve certain results. And it must be a measurement of our effort, not just simply, well, we're doing our best. Language like that don't mean nothing. How are you doing? Well, so far, so good. No. It must be, we have set about to achieve 1, 2, 3, 4. We have not achieved all 4, but we have done 3. As a measurement of your involvement and efficiency of the work you do. Since Disabilities Awards Week, we have been having several sensitization sessions with the PWDs, board and executives of disabilities, sector organizations, PSOJ, public sector, senior management, and several under the law features have been aired. Features of all of those activities are being aired, and we will intensify that. This public education campaign will also stress the importance of the JCPD and the Disabilities Rights Tribunal and focus more on what persons with disabilities and the people of Jamaica need to know and do under the Act. The JCPD has in excess of 36,000 applicants, but only 13,000 on the register. We need to register more. A total membership of over 36,000 and only 13,000 are registered. We have to correct that. I'm therefore appealing to you to make every effort to get registered so that you too can be served by the good work of the council. Much has been done, and there is still much more to be done. February 14th is but a stepping stone as we move to make Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and to do business for all. For all. Not a select group, not for a discriminated group, but for all Jamaicans. I wish to thank my friend, he's not here with me today, but Senator Morrison is my buddy, and we have been friends for years. We don't share the same politics, but he's online, wonderful. But I want to make him know that he has my full support here and abroad. He's our big shot. He's, you know, UN man and all that. Can't just talk to him any way. But I want to thank him for his effort, and he is determined, committed, and intends to do all he can for the community of disabled persons. And thank him for inviting me to this seminar. It has been a real pleasure for me to be here with you today and I wish you all that is good in your deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Minister. We were very happy to have you. And I want to thank you so much for the commitments that you have made and the information that you shared with respect to that gap between when the act was passed and the implementation, which will be on February 14. So just to, I'm not paraphrasing, but just to remind us that the minister spoke about our personal commitment coming from the heart to facilitate persons with disabilities, and of the importance of the confidential register, persons with disabilities to join and ensure that they are registered with the council, the importance of the council's aggressiveness and its vibrancy going forward to champion and to protect the rights of all persons with disabilities, how much public education and sensitization, or how many campaigns have already been had and are to come, and certainly about the importance of the Disabilities Rights Tribunal. So we look out for that. And the importance of the codes of practice, particularly in education, healthcare, and around transportation. Minister, you spoke of the manholes, and I want to add to that the parking on the sidewalks. You know, a lot of vehicles parked on sidewalks, blocking the access, particularly to persons using their white canes. Thank you again, Minister. At this time, I will invite Senator Dr. Floyd Morris, Director of the UWI Center for Disability Studies, to speak to us on the act itself, what is in it for me. And before I invite Senator to speak, I will just say that Senator Morris is a colleague, my colleague in the Faculty of Social Sciences. He is a long-standing advocate and researcher of persons with disabilities. Senator is very well published in this area, and he's to be commended for the tremendous contribution to the Academy in this area. He has been the director for the UWI Center for Disability Studies since 2018, and he has worked with the UWI to establish the entity. He actually worked with us to establish the entity in 2009. He's a member of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The minister spoke of how much of a big shot that he is internationally. And he was the one who led and drove the process for the drafting of the Disabilities Act in Jamaica. So it gives me great pleasure to invite Senator Dr. Morris, my colleague and friend, to speak. Senator, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ricketts. And thanks for your gracious words and compliments. And I must once again express my profound appreciation to all the individuals who are participating today, and undoubtedly my friend Minister Samuda, you know, who on all occasions that I have had an event at the university and invited Minister, he has made himself available. And Minister, I really appreciate the effort. And I also want to acknowledge that you are a man of your word, because when we met in 2020, and when you were first appointed as minister, you told me what your priorities for the community were, and included in that was the implementation of the Disabilities Act. And you have worked diligently and set the effective date for the 14th of February. And I am fully committed to helping you and the team in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security to get this legislation implemented to its optimum for persons with disabilities. Let me take this opportunity to welcome all the participants to this special seminar designed to give greater insight on the legislation that has been formulated to protect the rights and dignity of persons with disabilities in Jamaica. This legislation was adopted in 2014, having gone through a long process of consultation, starting from 2004, when I was Minister of State in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. I was extremely committed then, as I am now, to ensuring that persons with disabilities are included, allowed to participate, and not discriminated against in the Jamaican society. This legislation will do all of this, and you are the ones who have to ensure that these goals are realized and persons with disabilities receive the benefits. The legislation is anchored in the human rights model of disability. Persons with disabilities under this model are viewed as rights holders and are therefore subject to all the fundamental rights and freedoms entrenched in diverse international human rights treaties. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, that was signed and ratified by Jamaica in 2007, is the gold standard for this human rights model and is a feature of the Disabilities Act 2014. The object of the act are A, to reinforce and recognition and acceptance within Jamaica of the principle that person with disability has the same fundamental rights as any other person in Jamaica. B, promote individual dignity and individual autonomy, including the freedom of choice and independence with a disability. C, ensure effective participation and inclusion in society for persons with disabilities on an equal basis with others. D, prevent or eliminate discrimination against a person with a disability and promote respect for differences and acceptance of persons with disabilities as part of human diversity and humanity. The legislation carries 11 parts and 51 sections. For the purpose of this presentation, we will not go through every single section. However, we will delve into the most essential features of the Act to show how it will benefit persons with disabilities. So join with me for the next few minutes as I delineate the salient aspects of this legislation. We will finalize on a discussion on how this legislation will transform and empower persons with disabilities. Section 2 of the Act is what we call the interpretation clause. This section gives the definition of the diverse terms and concepts used in the Act. For the purpose of this presentation, I will focus on the definition for access, discrimination, persons with disabilities, and reasonable accommodation. Access, according to the legislation, include in relation to premises, freedom to enter in, approach, communicate with, make use of, or maneuver within any premises. Discrimination means any distinction, exclusion, or restriction on the basis of disability, which has the purpose or the effect of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise on an equal basis with others of privileges, legal interests, rights, benefits, and treatments in the political, economic, social, cultural, civil, religious, educational, or any other field, and includes all forms of discrimination, including denial of reasonable arrangement. So discrimination covers a wide area. And this is important for us to understand in the whole scheme of the legislation. Persons with disabilities, or where the context requires, person with a disability includes a person who has a long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairment which may hinder his or effective participation in society on an equal basis with other persons. So that is the definition that is there in the legislation for a person with a disability. Reasonable arrangement means the necessary and appropriate modification and adjustments, not imposing a disproportionate or undue burden where needed in a particular case to ensure to a person with a disability the enjoyment or exercise on an equal basis with others of privileges, interest, benefits, and treatment, and to facilitation of such privileges, interest, benefits, and treatment by the provision of auxiliary aids and services, including A, equipment or devices that alleviate the effects of a disability, B, the acquisition or modification of such equipment or devices, C, duly qualified interpreters, technologies, and effective methods that can orally deliver and receive material available to a person with a disability. And D, duly qualified reader, taped audio, visual, text, and other effective methods of making visual and delivered materials available to a person with a disability. So reasonable arrangement is basically looking at what are the necessary measures that an institution, a company, or an organization will put in place to accommodate a person with a disability in his or her pursuit of education or employment or a particular given field. It is extremely important that we learn and understand the terms and concepts. We have to be able to relate to them on a daily basis. And therefore, knowledge of them is foundational to understand what is in the legislation for you. Part 2 deals with the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. Section 5 establishes the JCPD as a body corporate. What this means is that the organization will function as a statutory entity with its own seal. It will have the right to hire staff as it sees fit and to govern its proceedings. Importantly, it will have command over its own budget, and therefore services offered by the new entity should be more efficient. currently, it takes over a year to get some benefits from the existing JCPD. This is because they have to go through the Ministry of Labor and Social Security to get things done. But under the new regime, this will change. And once the resources are available, then persons with disabilities should be able to get benefits quicker. Section 5(2) of the Act makes provision for the constitution of the council. This is set out in the first schedule of the Act. It lucidly outlines the staffing arrangements of the council, how approval for salaries ought to be conducted, and how the council is to be funded, among other things. Section 6 of the Act sets out the functions of the JCPD. All of these functions are designed to achieve the objectives of the legislation. It states, A, advising the minister on matters pertaining to persons with disabilities in an effort to promote effective measures for, 1, the prevention of circumstances which cause a disability in persons, 2, the rehabilitation of persons with disabilities, 3, public education concerning disabilities, and 4, improvement in living conditions of persons with disabilities by facilitating their social and economic development. Section 7 of the Act establishes the Board of Management. The primary responsibility of the board is to determine the policy directions of the general administration of the council. Its constitution is set out in the second schedule of the Act, where it outlines, among other things, who is responsible for selecting members of the board. That is the minister's responsibility. How the chairman is appointed, that is the responsibility of the minister. How many members are to be on the board, the representation of different disability groups, because it makes provision for a certain number of persons with disabilities to be on the board, and the quorum for the board. Section 9 of the Act gives the authority of the council to formulate codes of practice, and minister spoke to that, for the prevention of discrimination against persons with disabilities. It states the council shall, A, prepare codes of practice for guidance on matters under this Act, and B, review those codes of practice and, where appropriate, make alterations thereto. And each such code of practice shall be laid on the table of the House of Parliament. And Minister indicated that thus far, 3 codes of practice have been formulated: the codes of practice for education, that for healthcare, and for employment. And I would add in that mix the building code, because the building code in itself is a code as well. Section 13 of the Act mandates that the council must maintain a confidential register. This register should contain all persons with disabilities in Jamaica, and I urge all members of the community of persons with disabilities to get registered. The section states the council shall maintain a confidential register with confidential information with the particulars of persons with disabilities. So the information that is given to the JCPD must be kept confidential, and it can only be shared based on the stipulations in the Act. Section 14 of the Act stipulates that a person with a disability or a caregiver can register an individual with a disability. The person with disability or the caregiver must complete the application in the prescribed manner. The prescribed manner is set out in the respective forms in the regulations governing the Act. Part 3 of the Act deals with the Disabilities Rights Tribunal. Specifically, Section 15 of the Act establishes the tribunal, which is called the Disabilities Rights Tribunal. This is a tribunal that will have the right to hear matters relating to the discrimination of persons with disabilities in Jamaica. Its constitution is set out in the 3rd schedule. The minister with responsibility for persons with disability, Minister Samuda, has the authority to appoint the members of the tribunal, subject to the provisions set out in the Act. Section 16 gives the authority to a person with a disability or a caregiver to lodge a complaint to the JCPD if there is a perceived violation of the rights of an individual with a disability. This can be done no later than 2 years after the occurrence of the violation. It must be noted that the complaint must be taken to the council for investigation to be done. And this is very much important because process and procedure is important in law, and I am urging persons with disabilities that if at any time you feel that your rights are violated and you are discriminated, document what the experience is, and if you speak to the person that has violated your rights and nothing comes of it, then you go to the JCPD, and the JCPD is mandated by the law to conduct an investigation. And in conducting the investigation, if there is not a resolution with the violator, then the JCPD must pass that information on to the Disability Rights Tribunal for action. Section 16(2) of the Act outlines the basis for the complaint of a person with a disability or a caregiver. It states, 2, an aggrieved person may make a complaint for the reason that there has been A, an act of discrimination carried out against a person with a disability, B, failure by the respondent in the complaint to comply with the codes of practice prepared in accordance with Section 9, C, failure or refusal of a person offering any benefit or membership under Section 41(1) to ensure that any specified term and condition of such benefits or membership are in accordance with Section 41(2). D, any other contravention or any other provision of this Act. So those are the circumstances in terms of an individual dealing with the complaint. The Act makes provision for persons with disabilities to lodge complaints against the JCPD in any operations relating to its function. Section 16(3) of the Act gives authority to individuals with disabilities to make this complaint to the public defender. So if you as a person with a disability have a grievance against the that matter with that matter. Section 18 of the Act outlines the circumstances under which the council may conduct an investigation. The legislation requires that the JCPD must take action with regards to any complaint that is brought to it by a person with a disability or caregiver. Section 18(2) speaks to this. It states, 2, the council shall, with respect to a complaint made under section 16, A, refer the complaint to the tribunal for determination, or B, with the consent of the parties named in the complaint, refer the complaint for alternate dispute resolution. So there is another feature that is in the law that the JCPD can actually use to assist in resolving a matter rather than just taking it straight to the Disability Rights Tribunal, and that is to have some form of alternate dispute resolution, because the JCPD might, based on its assessment, think that the matter could be resolved through an alternate dispute resolution. The Act also outlines actions that may be taken by the DRT about complaints that are brought to its attention. Section 18(3) speaks to this. A person with a disability can bring a matter to the court based on a decision made by the DRT. In this regard, the JCPD may give support to the person with disability as outlined in section 22 of the Act. Part 4 of the Act deals with discrimination against persons with disabilities. Section 25 expressly states, a person with a disability shall not, by reason of such disability, be subject to any form of discrimination. 26 to 28 deals with the situation of education, among other things. Frowns this of this issue. Section 26 states shall not deny a person with disability from being enrolled at or attending the institution by reason of their disability. 2, an educational training institution shall provide the support necessary to ensure that in relation to the institution, a person with a disability, A, has the most reasonable access to the education or training provided, B, has access in the least restrictive environment and best suited to individual needs, C, being a student of the institution is not in relation to student services provided, placed at a disadvantage, and D, is provided with a reasonable arrangement and receives the support required to effectively facilitate his education. 2, each caregiver, as far as practicable, monitor the circumstances of a person with a disability in their care in order to ensure that the person is not subject to discrimination. And B, where necessary, C, file a complaint against the council in relation to a person with disability subjected to discrimination in the provision of education and training. 3, an education or training institution shall have regard to the provision of any applicable code of practice issued by the council under section 9 and take reasonable steps to comply therewith. For the purpose of this section, educational or training institution means a private institution or a public institution which is engaged in the imparting of knowledge or skill. So here you see in this section, and I made sure I went through it extensively because education is fundamental for persons with disabilities, and educational institutions have to put in place the necessary measures to reasonably accommodate persons with disabilities. And that is why we have the code of practice for education now to assist in guiding those institutions, whether they are public or private, to prevent discrimination against persons with disabilities. Part 6 of the Act, which covers section 29 to 31, deals with the issue of employment, which is very important for persons with disabilities. The law frowns upon discrimination against persons with disabilities as manifested in section 29 and 30. Section 31 is most significant in light of practices in the labor market. It deals with the situation of an employee developing a disability on the job and how it should be treated. It states, where an employee has become disabled, whether by virtue of his employment or otherwise, and that employee is no longer capable of executing the task required by his contract of employment, insofar as there is no disproportionate or undue burden, the employee shall redeploy the employee to a position that A, is commensurate with the current skills and ability of the employee, and B, does not result in loss or remuneration and benefits to the employee. So we have seen this situation occurring in the labor market from time to time, and especially what they call medical boarding, where a person develops a disability on the job and then they move immediately to medical board the individual. What this legislation is doing is saying that is not the way how it should go. A person with a disability can function effectively on the job. And so what must happen is that the employer, in discussion with the employee, must find alternative mechanism to reasonably accommodate the person with disability in continuing their job. Part 7, which covers section 32, 33, and 34, deals with the issue of participation in political office and public life. This is one of my favorite sections of the Act. Section 32 deals with specifically the issue of participation in political office. It states, a person with a disability shall not, by reason of such disability, be denied the opportunity to participate in programs, activities, or work that relates to political office, including A, the opportunity to vote using procedures, facilities, materials, and support that are appropriate, accessible, and easy to understand and use. B, the opportunity to be elected to political office and perform public functions at all levels of government, and involvement in the activities and administration of political parties. And certainly, I have been involved in all aspects of this section of the legislation. There's no way that this act could be passed without giving protection for individuals to participate in the political landscape, because it is in participating in the body politics of the country that persons with disabilities are going to get to impact on the decision-making process. I can tell you, when I became Minister of State in 2001, I was really struck that I was really struck that we never moved earlier to establish legislation for persons with disabilities. And I had consultation with the community of persons with disabilities, and we decided that this was where we were going to go, and I've been pushing for the implementation of that legislation subsequent. Notwithstanding the protection provided for most persons with disabilities to participate in political office and public life, the Act excludes some persons with disabilities based on current constitutional provision. So, to say, persons with mental disabilities can be properly rehabilitated and can participate in political office and public life. Part 8 of the Act deals with the issue of healthcare and persons with disabilities. Section 35 deals with this matter specifically and frowns upon discrimination against persons with disabilities where health is concerned. It requires that persons with disabilities not be discriminated in healthcare and provide minimum standards that must be held for persons with disabilities in this regard. Part 9 deals with premises and housing where persons with disabilities are concerned. Section 36, 37, 38, and 39 are covered in this part of the Act. It makes it pellucid that no individual owner of any building can discriminate against a person with disabilities in the of premises and housing. It makes provision for reasonable to be provided for persons with disabilities using premises or leasing for dwelling purposes. Public transportation for persons with disabilities, and Minister spoke about that. It mandates the minister to, as far as practical, provide accessible transportation for persons with disabilities. Section 40 of the Act states, 1, the minister with responsibility for public passenger vehicles shall ensure that as far as practicable, the provision of public passenger vehicles that are accessible and usable by persons with disabilities. 2, in this section, public passenger vehicles include any motor vehicle or any other conveyance for transport by road, rail, air, or water that provides the general public with a general or special transportation service on a regular or continuing basis. Part 11 deals with miscellaneous issues relating to the Act. This part of the Act ranges from section 41 to 51. There are some sections that are of extreme importance to this seminar. Section 43 is one of them. Section 43 deals with circumstances where individuals are providing a service, but it is proving to be difficult to formulate the reasonable arrangements. In this regard, the Act makes provision for the government to assist as far as practicable. Section 43 states, where a person is able to demonstrate to the satisfaction of any court or tribunal that the provision of services to or in relation to a person with a disability, which, but for the provision of this section, would be required under this act, would constitute a disproportionate or undue burden, the government should facilitate, as far as is practicable, the needs of the person with disability. So if it is that you are working with a company and it is proving difficult for the company to provide a reasonable arrangement, and you bring the matter to the attention of the JCPD in dialogue with the agency can provide some form of assistance in that regard. The Act makes provision for penalties to be imposed against individuals who obstruct an authorized person or falsifies information to the council. Section 44 of the Act speaks to this situation. It states a person who assaults or obstruct an authorized person acting in the performance of his lawful function under this Act, or B, knowingly gives false or misleading information to the council or any authorized person acting in the performance of this function pursuant to this Act, commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction before a resident magistrate to a fine not exceeding $1 million or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 6 months, or to both such fine and imprisonment. So if you falsify information to the JCPD, if you obstruct an authorized officer from the JCPD in carrying out his or her function, it's a violation of the law and you can be charged in the courts of law. Similarly, the Act makes provision for penalties to be imposed on body corporates that violate any section of the Act. Section 45 of the Act deals with this. It states a body corporate that commits an offense against this Act is liable on summary conviction before a resident magistrate court to a fine not exceeding $1 million to every director, manager, secretary, or other similar officer concerned with the offenses liable on summary conviction before a resident magistrate to a fine not exceeding $500,000 or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 6 months, or to both such fine and imprisonment. I am going to cut my presentation here and indicate to you that this law, if it is carefully implemented by the new JCPD, because the JCPD that exists now is not the JCPD that will be implementing the law. It is a new entity that is going to have significant independence from its parent ministry, the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. It will still fall under the aegis of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. It will still be under the ministerial directive of the minister, but it will have a great degree of autonomy now. So instead of its budget being sent directly to the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, where the permanent secretary directs the funds, this will be, the monies will be sent directly to the JCPD, and the executive director will have charge over the budget. I'm absolutely excited about this legislation because what it is going to do is to bring persons with disabilities from the fringes of society into the mainstream of Jamaican society. More disabled people will get education. More disabled people are likely to get employment. More disabled people are likely to get better health care. Better transportation services are likely to be formulated with the implementation of this legislation. And what has to happen is that all the organizations, non-governmental organizations, the Center for Disability Studies must ensure that we police the legislation so that there's no violation of the fundamental rights and freedoms of persons with disabilities. And I am prepared to do whatsoever I can, Minister. I'm prepared to do whatsoever I can to the team at JCPD to assist in driving the disability agenda. God bless you. Thank you very much for your participation. Yeah.
Of Jamaica, we are going to have to learn the definitions of the words such as access, discrimination, who a person with disabilities is, and also very importantly, that term, reasonable arrangement. Yes, reasonable arrangement. And we heard, of course, of the new JCPD, the importance of caregivers as duty bearers for this piece of legislation, and also of the codes of practice. Senator, as I listened to you, I saw a lot of similarities with the Child Care and Protection Act. And I see the JCPD now almost in a similar way as I see the Office of the Children's Advocate. So I think we have best practices right here in Jamaica. And so the new JCPD will not be left, in other words, without good examples that have gone ahead. Thank you again, Senator. At this time, we move on now to the panel discussion. And I want to invite 3 speakers. I'll tell you a little bit about them. So I am inviting Mr. Damian McLean. I am inviting Miss Gloria Goff, who is already seated, and Dr. Christine Hendricks, who heads the new JCPD. May I have all, would all speakers move then to the head table? I will wait for them to be seated before I introduce them to you. Oops. Okay. Dr. Hendricks, yes, you can have a seat. Thank you. So I am about to introduce the panelists for our panel discussion. And our panel discussion will involve 3 panelists. And I will start with Dr. Christine Hendricks in terms of the introductions. She is the current head of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. We heard a lot about this new entity, newly reorganized entity. Dr. Hendricks has worked with the organization for over 20 years, and she is a strong advocate for persons with disabilities. Dr. Hendricks will speak on the new JCPD, which is the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. We also have Ms. Gloria Goff, and Ms. Goff will speak on the effect on grassroots organizations. That's the effects of the piece of legislation or the act on grassroots organization. Ms. Goff is the executive director of the Combined Disabilities Association. She too is a long-standing advocate and champion for persons with disabilities, and she was instrumental in the preparation of the Disabilities Act. And our third presenter will be Mr. Damian McLean, who will speak on the effects on youth. Mr. McLean is an outstanding graduate of the Faculty of Social Sciences, one of our proud graduates, and he is the chairman of the Jamaica Society for the Blind, and again, a brilliant advocate for persons with disabilities. So colleagues, I invite us to welcome the three panelists. Let's give them a good rousing round of applause, and we will ask them to speak. In which order would you like to speak? On my schedule says Mr. McLean will speak on the effects on the youth, Ms. Goff, followed by Ms. Goff, who will speak on effects on grassroots organizations, and lastly, Dr. Hendricks on the new Council for Persons with Disabilities. Thank you. Mr. McLean, would you like to come to the podium? Or you want to speak from, can he be facilitated by sitting? You want to come? Yeah. Okay, all right. So you can.
This is the mic, right? Ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed, good morning.
Good morning.
It is my pleasure to be a part of this panel, to be a part of this seminar, to make a presentation in this forum. But before I get into it, I too want to pay my respects and pay my respects to the University of the West Indies and their role in terms of bringing to the fore the rights of persons with disabilities. I mean, I've heard the stories like from in the 60s when persons attempted to come to the university and had their struggles and how much they had to battle on in terms of being here. But to stand here in 2022 and the work of Dr. Figueroa and Professor Witter, and then the different committees of persons with disabilities that were set up on campus, to see this work come in full circle, and we have now a Center of Disability Studies. It is indeed a great achievement, and I too want to just highlight that even before I get into my presentation. Okay, so today, the effects of the Act on the youth population with disabilities. Now, I want to bring some context to my presentation. I call this the bread and butter issues, and how this act meet the bread and butter issues that the youth faces in today's society, and that's youth with disabilities. So firstly, we have youth ranging from 0 to 24, 25 years old, depending which definition you are using. And what are the needs of these youths? So they will have educational needs, they will have transportational needs, they will have healthcare needs because they have disabilities. So naturally, they will also have healthcare needs. Now, this act will definitely have an impact in terms of putting in place and also encouraging the correct activities, the correct actions that will allow for these needs to be met. Now, we had what we call a piecemeal approach prior to this act coming into place, where, for example, somebody who uses a wheelchair does well at I have to watch my age now, Now I think it's at PEP, right? It's at PEP now. I'm from Common Entrance days, so forgive me. Right, so somebody does well at PEP and passes for a high school and they are using a wheelchair. Now they pass, you have the choice of 7 schools and you have chosen your 7 schools. But when the grades come back, your grades are great and you get your school of your choice, but your school not accessible. What happens? Back in the day, you have to settle for another school. Maybe it's a school that's not in the 7 that you would have chosen. This is very unfortunate. We want to ensure that we reach the point where persons with disabilities who make their choice in terms of school, for example, which they want to go to, that the schools have become accessible to the point where they can go to the school of their choice in every sense of the word. And that is what we speak about when we talk about bread and butter issues. The parents need to be proud that the child has gotten through to a school of their choice. The child also wants to be proud that they've gotten through and placed at a school of their choice. Let us talk about transportation. Yes, the act is coming into being, and I sincerely hope that it deals with the grassroots issues of transportation. Our transportation system is of such that we have taxis, and I'm speaking about the legal side of it now, because we know that there's also the illegal side to it, and it thrives in Jamaica. We know that, we know this. But on the legal side of it, we are seeing where it is unfair to the youth with disabilities. And again, I draw my example on persons using wheelchairs. If I should take a route taxi to Crossroads, I think the current fare is $120 and I pay that. If somebody in a wheelchair chooses to go to Crossroads, they have to pay for themselves and pay for the chair to be accommodated. And this is a taxi that has been issued a route license by the Transport Authority in Jamaica. And when I pay $120, they might have to pay $1,000. So the disparity is great. These are bread and butter issues that these persons with disabilities have to deal with every day in terms of making progress with their lives or making way not just for themselves but also for their families. So it is very important that we find ways and means to make the act practicable for these persons, that they benefit fully from what the act is trying to achieve. We talk about employment, and one of the biggest challenge that persons with disabilities, especially the youth, is going to face is that of proving discrimination. Because it's easy to go around it, and let us not fool ourselves to think that it is not easy to go around it. Because it doesn't take anything for an employer to tell you that, well, we have, or simply put, somebody else got the job. I mean, when we compare the grades or the scores or whatever method which were used, you did not come out on top. Therefore, XYZ. It's difficult to prove discrimination, but with the act in place, it represents hope. It not only represents hope, but also through public education and working with entities such as the Jamaica Employers Federation, we should get somewhere in terms of encouraging and educating employers on how to accommodate persons with disabilities. The act serves as a silver lining. That's how I like to look at it, because I think the real fruits of it, they're not going to come February 15th. They're not going to come February 15th this year, nor will they come February 15th next year. But over time, through encouragement, through hard work, through education, the act will bring to bear on getting the rights of persons with disabilities out there and getting persons with disabilities in the mainstream of society. Now, there's a role for the state to play as far as youth are concerned when it comes on to the act on persons with disabilities. The state has to lead in this forefront. The state cannot just talk the talk. They have to ensure that when persons with disabilities turn up at public facilities, they are properly accommodated. And I share a personal incident which happened with me about 8 years ago. I took my son to Children's Hospital, and I went, me and my son alone. Nobody. And I mean, I had choices, but I went on my own, rightfully so. And upon going to the front desk to do registration and that kind of stuff, the clerk at the desk asked, first question, who did I come with? So I'm like, I'm here by myself. Well, you have to sit down over there, say, no, come in and know who will help you. You know, see you're out here busy. Being the person that I am, I had to naturally respond. And I had to let that person know that this is not how it works. And I made a big issue of it because the supervisor at the time now had to intervene to bring some sort of semblance to what was happening or what was about to happen. So these are in the public space, the hospitals, the clinics, the educational facilities. The state has to lead in terms of allowing the youth, not only the youth, but allowing persons with disabilities, not only youth with disabilities, but persons with disabilities to feel welcome whenever they approach state entities. When we talk about accessibility, today we are in the age of technology, and I am taken aback that the government has in place the eGov facility that do a lot of government websites and government pages. Yet some of these websites, some of these pages are not accessible. Now, these things shut out people out of the system. It frustrates the young people young people are like this, you know. They are, I call them microwavable popcorn. So you put them in the popcorn, you put them in the microwave, and instantly you have popcorn. So they want it now. They are, in their language, they are occurring. They want things that happen now. So when we have systems like our websites and they are not accessible, it creates problems. Persons become disillusioned. People are no longer with the system. And we have to bring a fix to that. So the Act make provisions to fix these things. And we are grateful for that, and we hope that we can get desired outcome from that. So the state apparatus, as I said before, they have a role to play. And if the state set the example, it is easier for the JCPD to go in and speak with the private sector. If the state does not set an example, that's one of the first drawing cards the private sector is going to have.
Act binds the crown.
Yes, I know the act binds the crown, but I also know too that one of Jamaica's weakness is maintenance of some of these things and monitoring of some of these things. There are a lot of laws in Jamaica that have lapsed. Some of them are on the books, like for years and nothing happened. Monitoring has been one of our greatest challenge in this country, and I do hope that this act does not fall to the poor monitoring that takes place in this country. I don't see it happening still because persons with disabilities,
yes,
they tend to monitor their affairs in a very strident way. So I don't see that changing any at all. But we have to recognize that in a lot of other cases, poor monitoring has been a grave challenge in Jamaica. Finally, I want to bring to bear the whole act of money, budget. In order for things to happen, in order for us to affect the lives of young people, in order for us to allow for people to enjoy their rights and freedoms, it's gonna take budgeting, it's gonna take money, it's gonna take commitment. So I'm recommending that while the JCPD is gonna carry its own budget and is gonna be monitoring and getting things done, I am calling on the government, the Ministry of Finance, the Finance Minister, to make it a mandate, make it mandatory that all ministries and agencies of the government, at least for the next 5 years or so, have in their budgets monies that will go towards either accommodation issues or sign language, having somebody with sign language, or having the staff complement trained in sign language, but make government entities equipped to accommodate persons with disabilities. One sure way to get this done is to build in your budget monies to finance something each year. We're not saying that you should take the whole hog. It's hard to eat a pig. But we're saying start somewhere over a period of time. If for the next 10 years, every ministry attacks something in the ministry to make it more comfortable for persons with disabilities, then we will be getting somewhere. We will be getting somewhere. So the JCPD, the new JCPD will need that kind of help. The new JCPD, yes, they will monitor, they will deal with tribunal issues and that kind of stuff, but they will need the help of each government entity to build out their own space, their own facilities, do their own way of accommodating, so that together we can achieve the objectives that we've set out to achieve based on this act that we have in place. I think we have reached somewhere, albeit 7 years later, we've made progress. And as I said before, things will change, but they're not going to change. Don't wake up February 15th and expect that because it was enacted February 14th, then we will be fine. No. And the youth, you have your role to play too. We can't just get up every day and criticize. We have to have actions behind those criticisms. And it's important that we too play our part in advancing this act of the whole human race. Thank you, gentlemen.
We thank Mr. McLean, and we now invite Ms. Goff. Yes?
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Do the dance.
All protocols observed, and I must say good morning to everyone here and those who are listening to us via Zoom and any other media. July and October 2014 will always be significant months in our history, when many of us sat inside and outside the Parliament of Jamaica to listen and watch the debate and the passage of the Disabilities Bill 2014 in the House of Representatives. We then had high hopes that in, say, more or less a year, the act would be effective. Approximately 7 years later, on October 6th, the Minister, the Honorable Carl Samuda, gave us the effective date as Valentine's Day, as February 14. Today, we look forward to that date, not with bated breath that a miracle will occur and change our lives significantly in the short run. Instead, as a date on which work towards the operationalization of the act must be expedited in the areas for which it makes provision. Let me now delve into the more specific expectations of the implementation of the act. And I must say here that my topic is really to look at the expectation, the impact that the Disability Act will have on persons with disabilities, grassroots persons with disabilities. And when we talk about grassroots, we're talking about you out there who often, sometimes really don't have a voice, who sometimes meet more challenges and have little help or assistance. So that's my duty today, And I must inform our audience that these views are not mine and mine alone. I did a impromptu telephone survey, and as well as in various fora where people express their views. So we begin, in the interest of time, with education. So let's pretend that the act is implemented, and let's pretend that the resources are allocated. Let's pretend that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we are living in that era. Let's pretend that our young people now will be our middle-aged people, or maybe not so much there, and that our children now will be in schools at different level. So our education system is of such, it is that these are the things that we expect to happen, that our education system will no longer, our education as persons with disabilities will no longer be restricted to the assumed capacity by the society, but we are able to achieve our full potential, whatever that amounts to, resulting from better academic and vocational training and prescribed therapeutic activities. Adequately trained professionals to deliver curriculum befitting our needs. That our teaching and learning environments are infrastructurally designed, ergonomically arranged, technologically and materially equipped to meet our needs. That's what we expect. And the necessary support, be it a shadow or a reader writer or large print or sign language interpretation, are provided. A system in which we are educated and trained in lifelong and marketable skills, not the old traditional skills alone. We have new skills. The market is demanding new eras. So we will have those skills, all things being equal, where an appropriate intervention is triggered to allow us to successfully undertake the variety of training available, where special education and training institutions are better resourced to provide and deliver the curriculum, quality curriculum, where the dream of inclusive education is realized at all levels of the education chain, to the extent that our children with disabilities are accepted and treated as peers by their non-disabled counterparts. So nicknames to match their characteristics of their disabilities and abuse of them become actions of the past, where our parents view our education with equal importance as our siblings, and therefore similar investments are made in our development. A time when our educational and training are viewed as part of our normal expectations of life. So a time in which we can qualify within our given disabilities and within our challenges and within our abilities, so that we can achieve a level of education that we are capable of achieving. Now let's move to employment. In that time, we are more confident in entering the labor market as our qualifications and competencies are competitive and more places of employment are physically accessible, and employers are prepared to engage us in determining how best to make special accommodations where necessary to ensure equal participation. Employment-related interviews are focused on qualification and attributes that can bring value to the organization and not focus on the disability and its perceived challenges or liabilities. We would have passed that. The existence of well-trained placement officers and job coaches to assist those requiring those services in organizations, and that these individuals will be accepted by our employers, that our managers and are eager to accept a worker with a disability because of the awareness they have through their own training and exposure. Ease of access to the programs that support entrepreneurship, because we can become business people. We are business people in our own rights. The acceptance by employers of the principles of affirmative action that allow a person with a disability, depending on the type and severity of the disability and the skills they have, to be employed minus certain standard requirements, which exclusion will not adversely affect the company. For example, asking me to write an essay to do a job in which I am going to be filing. More training, more trained employers, and more training opportunities for persons with disability. In the rural parishes, persons in rural Jamaica suffer more than us in the corporate areas because there are so many things that do not reach them. And there are so much awareness that needs to be done in those areas. So we will have employment opportunities. So let's look at health. More of our children with disability. Remember, we're talking about the new dispensation. And if all things are equal, and we're trying to be optimistic here. And as Mr. McLean said before, we are going to see to it that it doesn't take 17 years as the act took to the 14th of February from the 2004. More of our children with disabilities will be achieving their full potential due to early screening, detection, and appropriate interventions with increased numbers of assessment centers and professionals island-wide. So I don't have to leave Montego Bay to come into Kingston to get my child assessed. And my child doesn't have to wait 2 years for that assessment to be done. That health facilities are more accessible and better equipped to meet our needs. That rehabilitation is more comprehensive and available across the island through increased numbers of rehabilitation centers and rehabilitation professionals. And that persons are not asked to leave hospitals after an amputation or just losing their sight without follow-ups and counseling and all the support systems that need to be in place to prevent that person from wallowing in self-pity and dying with depression. The availability of assistive devices, those are very expensive, right? And we need training to be done so that they can be produced locally, and that government considers it their responsibility to also provide these at affordable rates. And I hope in years to come, like the US, you give the person with disabilities who really need it. Getting it free. Yeah. Increased number of increased numbers of therapists like speech, occupational, and so on, to support our children. Support provided by caregivers who have to remain at home to take care of their children, or be it children or adults. Now we go to housing. Reduction in the number of persons who now have to grudgingly ignore advertisements and for applications of houses because our income cannot afford it, despite some of the present existing assistance through the NHT and otherwise. So we'll have more affordable housing because we'll be earning more money, right? Yes. Noticeable reduction in the number of us living in unsuitable dwellings, and some people having nowhere to stay. The right to seek modification to dwellings that we rent. That is important, of course, within reasonable demands. Transportation, a critical part of the economic activity, is the mobility of our nation. Well, this is a vexed issue for much of us, be it disabled or not, but we're focusing on disability. right? So transportation is critical. We agree. So we need general improvement. Lord, a lot of improvement. So in the new dispensation, we'll have significantly improved customer service to eliminate acts of discrimination, especially against persons whose disabilities are not readily discernible. Where sometimes we have many good drivers in our present JUTC system, but there are those who discriminate, drive past people who they don't want to collect, and so on. But we won't have that then, right? No. Increased numbers of wheelchair accessible buses, not just apply 3 routes, but to apply other routes and at all times during the day, and eventually in time to come to be integrated into the mainstream transportation service. So if I want to go shop this morning, I can decide to go this morning or this afternoon or tonight because a bus will pass that can accommodate me and that I can interact with the rest of the public, because interaction is one of the greatest lessons for our non-disabled population. Implementation of apps, right, that we can use so that persons, especially with physical disability, don't have to stand up for an eternity before a bus comes. That's how it operates now. But then we'll be able to do that and say, okay, I'm leaving at 1 for the bus stop instead of 12, because the bus will not pass my way until 1:30, right? So we will have a transportation system that can accommodate us over time. Participation in political participation, Senator spoke to that. So what would person with disabilities want apart from having people strategically placed in these political areas? Because you know that where you have a voice, it's easier to get assistance. But in that time, we'll have a more physically accessible parliament, right? Where regardless of the disability, we're able to physically visit the parliament, attend and participate in deliberations where necessary. Access to the information produced by EOJ, Electoral Office of Jamaica, because we will have, it will be produced in a variety of formats and access to various media. Ability to participate fully in the voting process, because though mobility impaired, all venues selected for polling stations are physically accessible from the entrance to the voting booth. Though deaf, we are able to communicate with election day workers who are basic sign language proficient. Though blind, we can vote independently via electronically or with the use of ballot guides or the option to use personal assistant. Though intellectually disabled, we are able to get support, and the support is provided in the law by our families or friends. We are considered, and you know, the other thing I'm going to say, this is to our political representatives. In the new dispensation, we are considered as constituents during the tenure of your political representation, instead of just as a voter on election day. Because we can change our votes too.
True.
We are included in policy development, laws, etc., right? That will affect our lives and affect the country, because we just don't want to be talking about what affects person with disability alone. We are part of this country and we want to be included. I must say, you know, some of what I'm saying have already started, but we want to go further. So now we're coming close to the end, but not quite there yet. JCPD, Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, in the new dispensation, we are going to get better service, right? Because JCPD will be properly resourced with a cultural and operational shift that provides the services to promote and protect our rights. We'll have a more receptive and accountable JSCPD that receives and channels our complaints. Improve interaction with the JCPD through specific parish assigned workers with people in the rural area, despite the limitations that JCPD have, and because despite the efforts, get less accommodations because of how the system is, office is presently structured and staffed. Significant improvement in the approval and delivery of services. Significant reduction in the request from JCPD for repeat submission of documents because of some operational glitch. Greater awareness of our rights, because the JCPD will continue and improve our awareness of privileges and benefits and our rights. Of course, supported by NGOs who have been doing it for years. Now, finally, I'm touching the DRT. See, I'm getting there. The existence of, in that time, we'll have the existence of a mechanism that adjudicates on issues of alleged discrimination that are not resolved through mediation. Easier and speedier and cheaper or no cost of access to justice in terms of discrimination. Elimination of the deterrence of high legal costs that will help us to prevent us from having to go to the courts or to wait on the determination of the Attorney General. All of what I just said sound utopic? No, not at all. It is not a utopia. It is something that these are things that can happen. It happens in other countries. Do we not say that we're moving towards first world status? Well, 2030 is not far away. So we are hoping that while we don't expect all of this in 24 months, we are hoping that with the willingness, the political will, and the changing attitudes of some of our persons who are still in the past, and the responsibilities that we take on as persons with disabilities to equip ourselves with the necessary skills and knowledge of the Act, and that we take this responsibility and work with those who are working for us and with us so that we can achieve these goals. Our expectations are not unrealistic, but there is a provision for progressive realization. Our hope is that progressive realization will not be interpreted as snail's pace, but that serious effort will be made to implement the entire Act and enforce it. Persons who provided their feedback, we appreciate you. Those who did not, I'm sure you share the views of those I've presented. Thank you very much.
So we thank Ms. Goff, and we welcome now Dr. Hendricks, who will speak on the new JCPD.
Yeah, I made some changes, so that's okay. Yes. It is still morning, and so I say a pleasant good morning to my audiences across the various platforms, our minister who was here just now, all the other heads and dignitaries on the platform, and those present in the room, my colleagues, my friends, fellow persons with disabilities. I accept the protocols that have been established, and I move forward to present to you the new JCPD based on the Disabilities Act to be made to come into effect February 14, 2022. The Disabilities Act, as we have been told earlier, is an act that promotes, protects, and ensures that the full and equal enjoyment of persons with disabilities of privileges, interests, benefits, and treatments on an equal basis with others are upheld. And the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities is established or will be established on February 14 to ensure that this takes place. So the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities will be established as a body corporate. And many persons ask, what does that mean? Based on the Interpretation Act, Section 28, it states that a body corporate is an independent government body that can sue and be sued. It will have its own seal. It will make its own, in terms of human resources and other resources, those will be attended to by the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. And so the council, and I will call it the council for, so we remember the distinction between the JCPD and the council. The council shall perform such functions that will be necessary to give effect to the objects of the act that was spoken about in Section 3 by the Senator, that speaks to the fact that persons with disabilities should be treated and accorded the privileges as any other human being in society, and be able to be independent and function in society as they need to, as we need to, without prejudice. And so the persons with this, the Council for Persons with Disabilities will advise the minister on matters pertaining to persons with disabilities in an effort to promote effective measures for, one, the prevention of circumstances which cause a disability in persons, because we know that some disabilities are preventable. Secondly, we will advise the minister on matters regarding the rehabilitation of persons with disabilities, not we. The council will advise the minister on public education concerning disabilities and the improvement of living conditions of persons with disabilities by facilitating their social and economic development. Advise the minister on effective measures to ensure that current trends, policies, and programs concerning disabilities, and 6, developments internationally regarding the rights of persons with disabilities, with a view to improving the service delivery and the status of persons with disabilities. The council will be monitoring the operations of such trends, policies, and programs, and reporting to the minister the results of such monitoring. 8, conducting public education programs about this act and related legislation highlighted in the requirements in the law. 9, preparing codes of practice as outlined in Section B of the Act for the avoidance of discrimination on the grounds of a disability. 10, on its own initiative or upon the request of the minister, the council will make recommendations to the minister regarding the enforcement of this act and any other national measure that will need to be put in place for the avoidance of discrimination against persons with disabilities. The council will also advise the minister or make such recommendations about any policy and programs of the government that they should have due regard to the interest of persons with disabilities. The council also may undertake, arrange for, or support, whether financially or otherwise, research or the provision of advice or information. B, with the approval of the minister, impose charges for facilities or services made available by it for any purpose. C, enter upon any premises other than a dwelling house at a reasonable time for the purpose of carrying out an inspection or inquiry for ensuring compliance with the Disabilities Act. The council shall, upon request by the minister, make recommendations or give other advice under this section on any matter specified in the request. In terms of complaints against the council, the provisions of the Public Defender Interim Act of 1995 will have effect, which means if somebody is aggrieved with the council, they can take it to the public defender. In terms of the functions of the council, before I get there, the Act also establishes a board of management, which the council will be guided by. So the board of management shall be responsible for the determination of the policy and the general administration of the affairs of the council. In the second schedule, section 6.2 speaks to the constitution of the board. And it says that the board will consist of no less than 17 members and must include persons with disabilities or the organizations representing them. And the broad areas of disabilities covered that must be represented on the board are physical disabilities, intellectual disabilities, visual disabilities, deaf or hard of hearing. Ministerial directions. The minister may, after consultation with the chairman, give to the council such directions of a general character as to the policy to be followed by the council in the performance of its functions, as appear to the minister to be necessary in the public interest, and the council shall give effect thereto. That means whatever is said, that is what should be carried out by the council. We spoke about earlier that the council will prepare codes of practice. So not only shall the council prepare these codes of practice for guidance on matters under this act, but it shall also review those codes of practice for guidance and, where appropriate, recommend alterations thereto. I need to also say that after the act comes into effect, there will be a process of review of the act 3 years after it comes into effect. So 3 years after February 14, 2022, there is a review of this Disabilities Act. Section 12(1) of the Act states that the council shall maintain a confidential register with the particulars of persons with disabilities. 12(2), the register shall be kept in such form and all entries, alterations, and removals of entry shall be made in such manner as may be prescribed. And the regulations outline how these entries, alterations, and removals are to take place. And it also specifies the forms that are to be utilized by the council. We have been hearing that the forms and the process has been tedious. The new council will fix that with the new forms that are currently in the regulations and the process going forward. The confidential register, continuing in that vein, 12.3 says that a person whose name for the time being is in the register is in part referred to as a person registered as having a disability and shall be issued in the prescribed manner with a certificate of registration and any other material that the council so deem that it needs. Now, what are the benefits of the newly established Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities? Number one, persons with disabilities will have an official advocate. So we have had advocates over the years. The Combined Disabilities Association has been that umbrella body over the years that has stood as the non-government organization speaking to matters of disability. With this establishment, the new council will have that official title of advocate. There will exist an organization called the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities that will ensure that the rights of persons with disabilities are upheld. 3, there will be additional services through the new council, which will enhance those of the current JCPD. 4, social workers in every parish across the island. 5, there will exist and persons with disabilities will have a certificate of registration that will allow for ease of verification of the disability for all disabilities, especially those with invisible disabilities. We know the challenges persons have from time to time when they turn up at organizations and there is not that recognition of the disability. This certificate of registration will be your proof. So now persons come to the JCPD for letters for varying reasons, for waivers, to the NHT, for tax matters, all sorts of things. This certificate will be your verification. So you will no longer need to request those letters. Right. So I said earlier that the certificate will provide verification of the disability for access to benefits in other organizations. 6, of course, registration with the JCPD will allow for access to grants and scholarships that are specifically for persons with disabilities. Number 7, persons with disabilities will for the first time have a complaints mechanism that they can complain against matters of discrimination. And the JCPD will be that place that persons will come to make that complaint. The JCPD will investigate, and those matters that cannot be settled by dispute resolution will be referred to the Disabilities Rights Tribunal for final judgment. The Disabilities Rights Tribunal will hear the complaints and settle same. And for the first time also, number 9, there will be codes of practice that will be developed to guide society in order for them to avoid discrimination. So those are the benefits that the new council for persons with disabilities will provide, and I'm sure there will be more as time progresses. So what does the structure of this new entity, what will it look like? it will have its own corporate services. So there will be accounts and finance, human resource management and administration, procurement, communication and public relations, legal unit, and information and communication technology. And in terms of disabilities management, rehabilitation, transition, and social services unit, policy research and project management unit, information and client services, confidential registry, and access, investigation, and compliance unit. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's been my pleasure.
We thank Dr. Hendricks, and we also thank again the other speakers, Mr. McLean, and Ms. Goff. So we are at the point where we are inviting your questions for discussion. And so I am going to invite you, as I open the floor, to questions and to comments. You are managing that. You're managing. Oh, okay. So let's hear from the chat. Okay, so we have a couple questions already from the chat, and one question is, will there be future sensitization sessions that incorporate specific examples of how any discriminatory cases can be reported to the Disability Rights Tribunal and how the tribunal will respond? And then will the act be conceptualized and or simplified in reader-friendly versions and accessible formats? So that question is for you, Christine.
Okay, so let me take the last one first, and you may need to remind me. So there is already a user-friendly version of the Disabilities Act. More will need to be printed, and it is also on the JCPD website for persons who would desire such. So there is a reader-friendly version, and our website is accessible and friendly to all the disabilities. What was the first question again, please?
It had to do with, will there be future sensitization sessions that incorporate specific examples of how any discriminatory cases can be reported to the tribunal, and then how the tribunal will respond?
Okay, so of course there will be public awareness and public sensitization sessions going forward, continued and expanded and more robust, for the public to be prepared for the Disabilities Act. And even when the act comes into effect, for persons to always have information, not only at the JCPD, but in the public sphere.
Yes.
In terms of the Disabilities Rights Tribunal and the cases, we know that case law is built over time. And so as the cases are dealt with, it can be shared with the public or shared with persons with disabilities, how these matters have been dealt with. In terms of how the reports can be done, there will be continued education as well in terms of how persons will make reports to the JCPD. As I stated, the reports will be made to the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, whether by the caregiver or the person with disabilities themselves. They can bring the matter in writing as the act outlines, and when they take the matter in writing, the investigation unit of the council will do the investigation, interface with both parties to see if the matter can be settled by dispute resolution or whatever other means. If it cannot be settled, then it is referred to the tribunal for hearing.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Hendricks. I think the question has been substantially answered. There's a question, can someone speak on the purpose of the disability ID? I suppose that's the certificate. Also, whether it is a suitable mode of identification of doing any government business. Some entities, they say, refuse to take it.
Oh, the current ID.
Yes.
Okay, so I think we always have to remind persons that the current JCPD is not the JCPD that the Act speaks to. So the new entity will determine if it will maintain that ID for the fact that there will be the certificate of registration, and also the NIDS process will kick in as a national, providing a national ID for all Jamaicans, including persons with disabilities. Yes. So the new JCPD will make that determination. Okay. And please, I am not the new JCPD. Yes. I'm just speaking on behalf based on the information. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Someone says, Mr. McLean, no, budget is paramount in the discussions, plans, activities going forward to ensure that the Act becomes effective. For example, how will project funding be able to sustain the offering of an education program at the UE?
My question. Okay, so yes, I agree with the initial comments before that question in terms of the fact that yes, budget and budgeting will be paramount to executing aspects of this act and getting maximum benefits from it. Now, in terms of the UWI and its work over the years, we have seen, and I myself have been at some point, I have been close to the university's process, being that I had sat on the committee for persons with disabilities here, and I have also been one of the administrators at the Office for Special Student Services. And I know that the university over the years have made concerted efforts in terms of getting funding, whether it be project funding or they have deliberately carved out something in the budget to bring the Office for Special Student Services to where it's at, and to also implement the Center for Disability Studies. In fact, I think, well, not that I think, I am recommending that the government looks at the university model in terms of what has happened over the years in terms of education and see how it can be applied at the primary, at the early childhood level, the primary level, and the secondary level, and even at the post-secondary level, because the university model, as the dean highlighted earlier, it's not perfect, but the results are there. The results speak for themselves in terms of the number of persons with disabilities leaving the institution and being able to contribute to society. So that's a model that the government should sit down with the UE, look at it and see what lessons are there that the Ministry of Education and other facilities can use to improve their systems.
Thank you. If Senator would like to add anything at any time to this same question about public funding, project funding, sorry, Senator, you're free to. There's another question that has come, and this is with respect to the deaf community. Will they create format of the Disabled Act in Jamaican Sign Language and Country Sign Language for the deaf community's access? I think that's Dr. Hendricks. She would be able to answer.
It is a project that the current JCPD had embarked on or wanted to embark on for Disabilities Awareness Week. It is still on the table to be completed.
Okay, so that's a project that is
Yes.
currently in train.
Yes.
Thank you. Will the new JCPD, don't keep your mind, have full capacity to manage all the cases once we launch on February 14, 2022? The answer is
Not on February 14.
yes.
So the act establishes the organization on February 14. Thereafter, staff will have to be hired, well, the board and the new executive director will, along with their HR, will have to be hiring the staff and moving forward from there. So in a couple of months, the unit should be, should be in place. There should be a unit in Kingston and one in Montego Bay.
Thank you. There are many other questions for you, but I see Mr. McLean's hand, so yes. I suspect you're adding.
Yeah, I'm just adding to it to say that one of the things that we should look at too in managing expectations is that we should have a map in terms of what is to happen when, and I guess that can only come after the new board and the executive director sit down and work that out. But as soon as something like that is worked out, I'm sure that persons will be informed, right? The public would have been informed as to how all of this will unfold. And person should, I would suggest that the first year of this new dispensation is gonna be a tedious year, and persons should temper their expectations in terms of what is going to happen within this first year. So yes, change coming, things are going to happen, but let us be patient with the system and with ourselves as it unfolds.
Yes, and I think that's an important point about tempering expectations. I was saying a little bit earlier about the Office of the Children's Advocate, for example. We have that example here, and I mean, they have been able to realize a lot of improvements, but it has taken time, over time, and it will continue. Okay, so Dr. Hendricks, there are other questions for you. Well, you would understand why.
Yes.
Will there be a new registration for the new JCPD?
New registration, what, system or?
Just new registration. In other words, I suppose for those who have already registered, will they have to re-register with the new JCPD?
Okay.
I believe that's what.
So it's not a re-registration for those who are already registered as part of, it is, they will have to bring an application to allow for their name to go into the confidential register or their particulars. But those, so it's not they would not have to do the medical aspect of the process over.
Okay.
Right, but in terms of those who are not yet registered, they will have to bring an application and complete the registration process.
Okay, let me ask this question. Where can we go and apply for the certificate for disability?
When the new JCPD comes.
Yes, okay, all right. Who or what body will the board of the new council be directly responsible to?
They say that again?
Who or what body will the board of the new council be directly accountable to?
Oh, the minister with responsibility for disability.
Okay, all right, thank you. I think we could ask Ms. Goff this question. Could there be a support group in every parish for persons with disabilities? I think it will make things easier.
I totally agree with that. And the process has actually started, you know, because we have groups in a few other parishes, but self-advocacy is critical because although the law is coming into effect, it doesn't mean that our advocacy ends, you know. It doesn't mean now is when we need to be even more strident to ensure that people don't relax and get on their laurels and feel like we are comfortable with the fact that we now have an effective date and we have an act that is enforceable. It has to be enforced. And to have parish organizations is important because it will allow you to advocate for the things within your parish that needs to happen. Of course, other organizations advocate nationally, but sometimes when you have the little, that's why they have local government and central government, you know. You need people on the ground where you are. You know what your experiences are, and you alone know. Well, I shouldn't say alone, but you know more than others what your systems within your parish are capable of. So yes, I agree. And for advice as how to go about this, if you are not sure, then you can always contact Combined Disabilities Association as one of the agencies you can contact. There are other agencies. So yes, I agree.
Okay. I see Mr. McLean wanting to add.
All right, so I'm in total agreement with parish groups, and because parish groups make the work easier. The more groups we have advocating and monitoring, because it's important too that we understand the monitoring role that persons with disabilities will have to play. So I definitely agree to that. But what I really want to add to this discussion is to call on persons with disabilities to organize themselves, our caregivers too of persons with disabilities to organize themselves, because the disability movement in Jamaica, if we understand the genesis of it, we will understand that it came from people with disabilities themselves, organizing themselves and asking for what they want, lobbying for what they want. Those days are not over. We always have to be organizing. And I can tell you that we at the Jamaica Society for the Blind, if we hear of a group in a parish that is getting together, we stand ready to lend that support in terms of getting them fully organized and whatever other support is necessary. So people with disabilities, especially in the rural parts, they just need to start the process. And I know for sure that the JAD, that's the Jamaica Association for the Deaf, the JCPD, that's the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities in its current state, the Combined Disabilities Association and the Jamaica Society for the Blind stand ready to help groups in terms of getting themselves fully organized and fine-tuned. We just need to know of it.
Yes. Thank you very much. I think you can hand back the microphone to Dr. Hendricks. What actions are currently being taken to minimize the costs associated with completing the forms which are required for persons to register? What actions are currently being taken to minimize the costs associated with completing the forms required for persons to register?
The form, the medical, well, the new form will be the eligibility report form that is completed by the medical practitioner, should be completed by the individual's personal doctor rather than going to somebody else, or the clinic or the hospitals or the various health centers across the island. The government system is free of cost. There is no cost in going there. We know that the challenge in going there is the wait time, but in terms of going there, there is no cost. However, if persons choose to go to the private sector, there is nothing, we can't ask, well, we may be able to ask, well, the new council may be able to ask in terms of the Medical Doctors Association or the Jamaica Association of Medical Doctors to see how best they can, consider, the cost of that. But I believe if persons go when they are seeing their personal doctors, then they can fill in the information, because we don't need anything detailed. The council doesn't require anything detailed. I know the challenge might be for persons with intellectual disabilities. However, if they have gone to a school of hope, School of Special Education, previously called the various schools of hope, their information would have already been on record, and so the school could facilitate the completion of those forms.
Okay, thank you. Don't move the microphone. Okay, so maybe these are, have the regulations to the act being developed?
Yes.
The regulations were approved in the parliament in October.
Okay. And then
October this last year, 2021.
Thank you. In the interest of time, it appears as though we might just be able to take one other question, and there's a question here. What does the government plan to do for persons with disabilities who are attending other universities besides the UWI and may also need accommodation?
All the other universities are being encouraged and will be encouraged to draft their own policy for inclusion of persons with disabilities. I know the UTech has done or is doing some work on their own policy, in terms of how it deals with students with disabilities, and so other universities should do the same.
Thank you. I think there's one question from the room. So thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hendricks. So if anybody else has one more burning question, I suppose we could take it.
Do not turn it. Do not turn it. Okay, hi. Question is, you said that with the new JCPD, there'll be certificates and you already have a card. But seeing as we're moving forward as a technological era and technological people, is the word certificate just a word to say we're going to give them a card or a document, or do you mean a literal certificate that you normally print out, a big, broad, letter-sized thing? Because I think that would be impractical. And I also do believe that if the problem with the present ID cards are that businesses don't believe that they're verified or valid enough, why not take those ID cards back and just issue out new ID cards where they're able to have like a barcode system where you could actually scan it at the business site and pull it up, and you would see all the information needed to verify the person that, hey, this person has an intellectual disability, a physical disability, whatever disability it is. And you could actually, the barcode would refer you to the JCPD website, which would give you, even though you said that the records would be confidential and sealed, why not have a part of it, the records that can be public access or to a business access where anybody can say, okay, I'm disabled, here's my card, you scan it, you see the information on it, but you scan it to verify it, and it comes up on the website that is owned by the JCPD, so there's no way anybody can say it's not verified, it's not real, you're doing anything out of the ordinary. Why not have a system like that?
I suspect it would be in the same way that we now have the digital immunization cards. I'm sure that will be realized. I'm sure that will happen. Yes? Yes. Is there any last question or a comment? You have a question, sorry?
Oh, okay.
Oh, or a comment from the panel? Any? Yes, Ms. Goff. And Mr. McLean. And okay, so last words, well, for this session.
To my disabled colleagues, I am asking you to not just sit by while those of us work very hard to achieve what all of us want. But there is some strength in numbers, and you might have ideas that will improve what we are putting forward on your behalf. So be prepared, be ready to participate, to share, and whenever we ask for feedback, when we send out any questions or request anybody to participate, be willing. It can't be that at all times we just wait until something happens, and then we either agree or disagree or complain. So I'm just imploring, I know everybody will not have the capacity to do what I'm requesting, but everybody has something to share, and we are asking you that as we move forward to the day and after the implementation of the bill, and as I said earlier, it is not going to be a miracle thing, but we have to work together. So keep that in mind, that our expectations will only be realized if we work together as a team and if we empower ourselves to work with a team to get things done. All right?
All right, so Ms. Goff is calling on persons with disabilities. I am calling on the caregivers of persons with disability. Caregivers, parents, get involved. Please. Call the radio stations, ask questions. Call the JCPD, ask questions. Call Combined Disabilities Association, ask questions. Call JAD, call JAMR, call JSB. Call these places, ask questions, get involved. We find that too often the caregivers are absent. In my other dispensation where I work, I find a lot of caregivers coming there, caregivers of persons with disabilities. They don't know CDA, they don't know JCPD. They only come if they want help, and nothing is wrong with that. But get involved because you want a better future for the person with the disability that you're caring for. So be a part of the process, help us to get the change that we're asking for, and get involved. We need the eyes, we need the hands, we need the feet, we need everybody on board. We need the ears. Yeah, we need everybody on board.
And finally, I call on Jamaica, or society, or employers, all Jamaicans, you also have a part to play in the Disabilities Act. The Disabilities Act will impact you, whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not. And so all of us, churches, businesses, everybody together, persons with disabilities are human beings with rights just like you, just like everybody else, and they should be accorded these rights without discrimination. So we look forward to all of us working towards the implementation of the Disabilities Act being realized in Jamaica. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. I can't. Colleagues, I am really very sorry. I will have to ask you to just remain a little. There are a number of hands which we unfortunately missed on Zoom. We were looking at the chat rather than the hands raised. So colleagues on Zoom, could we hear you now? I think there were a number of hands up. Anybody? Are you able to see?
Hello.
Okay, so yes, can you just introduce yourself, please?
Hello, I'm Sean C. Harrison. Are you hearing me?
Yes, Sean Harrison, go ahead with your question, please.
The question is just a few brief observations that I made, that I would like to actually hear. I was diagnosed at age 19 with paranoid schizophrenia, and so my particular slant is towards those who are mentally ill. And so the first is that I would like to see an economic model that is meaningful and mandatory financial support consistently to all disabled, whether monthly or fortnightly. Because remember that a large contingent of the disabled are not employable. Secondly, I ask that you give us the right to choose to have a system of assisted living provided by the government. Make it right. So assisted living meaning persons definitely employed to actually cater to the needs of the disabled and the mentally ill, to actually be represented from the grassroots. Also asking to act be considered for housing solutions, being made more than accessible, and not just accessible, but free for the disabled, who oftentimes are not found in a position to have their own shelter being provided for them. Also, making medical pensions mandatory for all disabled at whatever point in their working experience they are found unable to continue their employ. And so moving from giving the mental health system so much autonomy that they have the power to treat whether or not the person consents. I'm asking also that it be made stipulatory that the men is not treated in public. This I see as a violation of our privacy, our confidentiality, and our human rights. And I ask too that you make medical pensions more financially viable so that the disabled can cater to their special needs. For example, nutrition and treatment. Currently, medical pensions are significantly less than pensions for those who have retired as a result of age. And lastly, I ask that you make health insurance inclusive of the option to choose naturopathic treatments for the mentally ill and the other disabled. That is my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Thank you very much. I think the issues you put on the table had to do with ensuring that persons with mental illness are adequately catered to and considered. And I think you've raised issues of medical pensions, housing, and health insurance to facilitate naturopathic treatments. So we have, well, certainly the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, represented here by Dr. Hendricks, has noted the points that you have made, and I am sure that they will be taken on board as the new JCPD rolls out. Thank you. Are there any other questions by persons on Zoom?
Yes.
Hand raised?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, good afternoon.
Please tell us who you are.
Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yes, I am Charlotte, visually impaired. But this question should have been for the minister, but I know he has representatives, so they can probably forward it to him. Why is it though that when persons who are blind retired from a post, it is not being filled by another blind person? That it's a burning question. It's really something that I needed, or we needed, for the minister to tackle. Why is it persons are the post is not being filled? Mrs. Hendrick, my answer.
See Ms. Goff's hand. Ms. Goff is going to give a response, but not representing the minister, of course.
Certainly not. Yes. Off the top of my head, though, I could say that's not a policy. So it's a recommendation that you are making, and that some persons have made more like talking to themselves or in a small forum. It has not been something that has been sent to a minister or to the government or any policy making division to say that, or it's not in the act to say that when a post becomes vacant, whether for persons with disabilities or any other disability, that it is filled by a person from the same disability group. And I think based on my experience, Charlotte, I'm aware of why you raise this issue, because so many persons with disabilities, so many persons who are blind are trained in a particular area, which other persons who retire or resign for some reason, they feel they could replace them. It's one way. In the new dispensation, the Disability Act states that at least 5% of government jobs should be reserved or provided for person with policy, or the policy, 5%. They took it out of the act. No, all right. I will get into that debate later, but I know it was part of included, but maybe they took it out as a policy decision. So it's in the policy, but the policy does not have as much teeth as an act, right? So it is something that maybe in discussion can be put forward for any disability group, because if you restrict it only to blindness, it would be another type of discrimination.
Right. So thank you.
Well, I just wanted to also comment on that matter to say that because that wouldn't be a position of the service and how of the government in terms of its setup, with the whole public sector reform and various changes at different points in terms of reform, these things would not necessarily hold unless one, it's in policy, or two, it's a mandate from higher up. And I guess over time, these are some of the things that we want to, once it's practical too, because that's another matter, but once these things are practical, then I do agree that they should be accommodated.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. McLean. Can we take the last two questions? So we're able to take two more questions from Zoom. Persons with your hand raised. Anyone else? Okay, it appears that that's the extent of the questions from our audience.
Hello.
Yes?
Hello.
Could you introduce yourself, please? Hello?
The host
Hello,
just
let us-
unmuted.
Okay.
My name is
Let's
Antoinette
hear-
Aiken. Found,
Oh, yes, Antoinette Aiken. We know you
Phone-
very well.
yes, founder of Tony Terp, a new body that will be certifying and issuing licenses to interpreters. My question is for the policymakers. I know not everybody is there, but I'm sure Ms. Hendricks could answer, or probably Ms. Goff, or probably Mr. McLean. Currently, there is a body under that organization, 90% deaf, who are currently working with people all over the Caribbean to try and create a certification program for interpreters, as we don't want what happened in Africa to happen to Jamaica or anywhere else in the Caribbean or anywhere else in the world, as a matter of fact. So my question is to the policymakers: how will you facilitate us and this group can be shared with the policymakers? How will you facilitate us in ensuring that this does not happen? Because as it stands right now, interpreters are just called and are not necessarily checked with Ready to Sign or other agencies to see if they're the best for the job or the most suitable. So how will that be solved going forward with the Disabilities Act? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aiken. So you've asked that Dr. Hendricks and others answer, and so we'll ask them to respond.
That's a challenging one. Tony, let me clarify. Are you asking whether or not the new JCPD will ensure that there is certification for sign language interpreters?
No, let me clarify. So we already started the process of working with people from different universities in the US and the UK and the Caribbean to create a certification program that is focused on the Caribbean. We are asking, are you going to facilitate this knowing that there is something already in the works? That's what I'm asking, Ms. Hendricks. You understand? I'm hearing our feedback. I'm not hearing you. I am not hearing anything. I don't know if I was disconnected or.
We're hearing you.
I'm hearing you now. I'm hearing you.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'm saying that I'm sure that the new Council for Persons with Disabilities will facilitate any collaboration or work that has to do with the development of disability and whatever works need to take place within the sector to ensure that there is authenticity, accountability, and all of those things that are necessary for good governance, you know, and to ensure that whatever happens is authentic, you know, for persons with disabilities. I'm sure the new entity will take on, you know, once it is presented. Well, the deaf will have a place on the board, so that is something that can be brought to the board by the community of deaf persons.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hendricks.
Thank you. Thank you. One last question from Zoom. Absolutely last. Yes. Can you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. Yes. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Yes, my name. Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Marcia McDonald, and I'm making a very simple request. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm making a very simple request in the public's interest as it relates to awareness. And the request I'm making is, could a hard copy of an abridged version of the act be published in the newspaper, and especially the code of practices, you know, that aspect of it, for in the interest of public awareness?
Thank you for that question, Marcia. Anybody, can you answer? Yes. Gloria, so Ms. Goff is answering.
Hello, good afternoon.
Well, maybe I should have allowed Christine because Dr. Hendricks, but as far as I know, the codes of practice cannot be published in any form before the act comes into effect, because it is really supposed to be produced by the new JCPD, so it cannot be disseminated as yet. So in terms of whether it can go into the papers, that would be the new JCPD's money spent on mandate. So I don't know if Dr. Hendricks wants to add, but that's as far as I know, being a part of the committee at the time that helped to develop the act.
And you're correct. Those are decisions to be made by the new entity. Of course, I'm sure the code will be out there once the new entity reviews the current ones that have been drafted. Of course, there will be others that will have to be drafted based on what the new entity sees fit, or how the new entity sees fit to assist the society in avoiding discrimination in the different areas that the Act speaks about. And then the dissemination will be made as public as is possible. Similar to the, in terms of the Disabilities Act, the simple version, as I said, it is there. And of course, as you recommended, it can be in the newspaper. However, it's a large document that's costly. So over time, aspects of it will be published.
Yeah, I was just mentioning an abridged version, but thank you very much, Dr. Hendricks. Thank you.
I would like to ask a question. Is it possible?
Can I?
Hello?
Oh. Hello?
Yes, are you guys hearing me?
Yes, hearing you. You will be our absolute last question.
Okay. My name is Shelley Lagrin, and I'm from St. Mary.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. I just want, in the rural area, as Ms. Goff pointed out early on in our discussion, when it comes to road space, I use crutches. I have a physical disability which I acquired about 16 years going 17 years. And what I realize is that traveling on the road in Highgate, because of how the vehicle would have to park, with Mr. Fred Morris would have a warehouse and Dr. Morris drive, there is no proper place for us to walk or use wheelchair or crutches, one. Two, there is no form of foundation, organization in Highgate to say to lobby on our behalf based on the whatever situation we're having back here. Because I have a brother who, he has Down syndrome, and there's nothing either to keep us straight or anything at all, because it's not all of us with disability are booked time. Or say, but our hands may work or stuff like that, and there's nothing here for us. Mentally, there are persons who I know as mothers who are caregivers who fall themselves into depression. Unlike me, I struggle with depression and I have other underlying issues because of this disability that I acquire. And then it, to me, it's as if you really don't have anybody to lobby on your behalf or to talk to that much. So what we'll put in place for persons in the rural areas definitely for us to be recognized, because it is most to be recognized with the person who is on the other side.
Okay, so we have Mr. McLean who is going to answer.
All right. I know the rural pains, and let me start from the point of saying that they're not going to be fixed overnight either. So that's the first thing I'd want you to understand. They're gonna be fixed, and I'm very hopeful about this, and I'm prepared to play my role in terms of pushing to get it done, but it's not going to fix overnight. So having said that, it takes me to the second point you raised, which is why I put up my hand before you finished, which is that it don't take bookwork to organize yourselves, you know. You are the organization. If you made it onto this platform today to raise the question that you just raised, you need to talk to the people around you in St. Mary. You say you know other people, talk to them, tell them, say, look, we want to organize ourselves because we want to lobby in the parish. We want to get these things changed.
Could I say something? I have spoken to Ms. Goff. Ms. Goff familiar with my name.
Mm-hmm.
On numerous occasions. The thing about it is, when I do get to person, I speak with them because Mr. Maras would have known me. It's like persons kind of get reluctant. They say that they're not really seeing nobody come out. It's like to get first to come out, they're saying that transportation and to find the finance to come out where they live is an issue with them.
All right, I get that, but you see, all right, so you see, let me show you how simple it can be. If you find 10 people, 5 people, 10 people, and you call Miss Goff and say, Miss Goff, you know, say, I have these 10 people who are interested in pulling together and doing some work in the parish. You know, say, Miss Goff will work some magic though.
I know,
it is.
That, I should get a location. I did speak with a pastor and said that he would have.
We can pick it up outside of this though. Yeah, we can pick it up outside of this, but I would want to continue this conversation because there are some smaller things you can do that makes a difference.
And I just want to add that the disabilities, I just want to add that the Disabilities Act is not just for Kingston. The Disabilities Act is for the entire Jamaica, all persons with disabilities, all government organizations, all private organizations. And so when the Disabilities Act kicks in, you know, the voices, the advocacy, talking to the parish council, continuously call the radio stations, speak, call the JCPD, call the CDA. Your advocacy will make a huge difference. Okay.
Sorry, just one thing. Yeah, Shalene, nice to hear you. But I think sometimes when we are having issues, as Mr. McLean pointed out, we need that one person who is committed to lead the charge, and they will get the support. And I know you understand why I'm saying that. So you now have to get the vibes, the enthusiasm, the commitment within yourself to be that lead person, and we can work from there. Because remember, I explained all of that to you. So we can work from there. All right?
Okay, Ms. Goff.
Okay, thank you. So we have brought the discussion, the questions, and the Honorable Minister Charles Samuda, Dr. Sadia Sanchez-Vegas, the Director and Representative of the UNESCO Cluster of Mr. Ashley Cummings, who brought us the prayer and invoked the Almighty's presence with us. Miss Gloria Goff, who you just heard from in this very important discussion. I also wish to thank the Dean, Professor David Tennant, who unfortunately couldn't be here because of other competing activities. but I hope that I represented him quite ably. Colleagues, thank you. So my closing remarks are very simple. Caregivers, I think it was both Damien and Christine, I believe Gloria too. Duty bearers, who are all of us, every last one of us, whether you have a disability or not, we are duty bearers and we have a responsibility to ensure the success of the Disabilities Act. Yep. So I urge all of us, including myself, to look out for persons with disabilities and to ensure that their rights are protected and upheld. Remember that there are some very important terms which Senator made us aware of. Access, we must know what the meaning of that is. Discrimination, for us to be able to point it out, we have to know how you define it. Person with disability, we must know who that person is. And also reasonable arrangements. We have to know what that term means. We have to make ourselves aware of the codes of practice, and we will do that once the act takes effect. We have heard the calls for the act to be made more accessible in formats that everybody could simply and easily understand. And I know that the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities and all of the allied organizations representing persons with disabilities will ensure that the act gets to every nook and cranny of Jamaica. So colleagues, without further ado, I just want to congratulate all who have been involved in ensuring that we have got to this point. And we all look forward to February 14, Valentine's Day, when this act takes effect. As Dr. Hendricks has told us, we will not realize all of the goals of the act overnight, but as Ms. Goff took us on that journey to imagine what life would be like in years to come, we look forward to that day so that all of us can realize the vision for Jamaica, the place of choice to live, to work, to do business, and to raise families. Thank you all.